Count Strahd von Zarovich is a classic D&D villain. And although I like his rules as written, vanilla, stat block, the one straight out of the book, I've seen some people say they're disappointed because it is essentially just the vampire spellcaster from the 2014 Monster Manual with a couple of tweaks. But there are other stat blocks out there. Some are quite famous, or should I say infamous, and they do things like maybe spread out the battle across the multiple phases. One is a very high challenge rating, things like that. And in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 of them. Welcome to DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. Before I go on any further, one of these is a spoiler for Vecna, Eve of Ruin. It's the spoiler that I think a lot of Curse of Strahd DMs already know, but I always like to say it just in case. So I'm going to talk about 5 different alternative stat blocks for Strahd. I considered how to show these in this video. What I might do is just show it kind of the full stat block in tiny text, because some of them are ones you've got to pay for. So it feels a bit weird, like splitting it up into like little blocks so you can see it all. The people who try and make money from these things may not like that. So I appreciate that it might be a bit weird that I'm talking about these stat blocks and you can't, it's kind of the zoomed out version you're seeing. What you could do is, if you've got a second screen or like a second device, is follow along while I'm talking about them, and then you can have a look through them as I'm discussing them, maybe consume it that way. Also, I made a lot of notes going through all the stat blocks, and then I realized just before recording, it's going to be really dull if I'm essentially just reading out every section. Obviously, I'm going to talk about the important stuff and differences, but I'm probably not going to talk about it in super detail because I think that would just get a bit boring. So I'm going to talk about the highlights with some of them and not go too in depth. And I'll include links for each of them in the description as well, if you want to check them out yourself. The first one I'm going to do is a official Wizards of the Coast stat block. And it's essentially what I'd probably consider the 2024 version of Strahd. It's his stat block in Vecna, Eve of Ruin. Spoilers for Vecna, Eve of Ruin. He appears in one of the chapters when the players go back in time to the Death House, and near the end they fight Strahd. And rather than it being an upscaled or stronger Strahd, especially given that the PCs will be a higher level, it is pretty much the same with just a few tweaks. If you're running Curse of Strahd 2024 rules, you might want to consider this stat block instead of the 2014 one. And I did a whole video about the rules changes if you want to check that out separately. But if you do that, you might want to consider doing some changes. The Vecna Eve of Ruin version is called Strahd Master of Death House. You might want to do things like give him his Misty Escape ability, because obviously they're going to be fighting him in Castle Ravenloft and not Death House. So his unarmed strike is now called Death Strike, cooler name. It's pretty much the same. Bite is now a bonus action, and it can be done in addition to 2 Death Strikes if it meets the criteria, grappled, restrained, etc. Change Shape is now also a bonus action. And he has an ability called Blighted Fire. It's a recharge ability, very much like Fireball, but instead of 8d6 fire damage, it does 4d6 fire and 4d6 necrotic. So it's a bit flavored more towards, this Necromancer wizard. Kind of reminds me of the ability that Death Knights have, where it's a similar sort of things like Fireball with fire and necrotic. He has fewer spells. Now, this is a big thing with the rules design changes with 2024. I think the consensus was that classic stat blocks from 2014 days were a bit too complicated for spellcasters, so they kind of, instead of having slots like a PC would, they can just have a fewer spells that they can cast a day, once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. He can now do Detect Thoughts and Fog Cloud at will, but he no longer has Prestidigitation, Ray of Frost, Comprehend Languages, Sleep, Fireball. Oh, he doesn't really need it because of the other thing I just said a minute ago. Blight and Animate Objects. And then the rest pretty much matches his 2014 stat block. One thing that's interesting here is he no longer has Ray of Frost, which means that his only range attack is that Blighted Fire ability, which is recharge. So if he uses that and then gets in a situation in a turn where he can't attack with a melee attack, then he's not much he can do there. I mean, he still has Gust of Wind and maybe some other spells that you might be able to use, and he can charm someone if they're within 30 feet. So there's other stuff he can do, but he couldn't, attack from a distance properly. Doesn't have Children of the Night, so I'd consider adding that in. And his legendary actions, he still has movement, but strike costs 2, whereas previously it was 1 action it cost, and bite is no longer an option. And if you are doing this, I'd consider adding Heart of Sorrow, his minions, his lair actions, if he's in Castle Ravenloft, and so on. Obviously, Strahd Master of Death House is intended for a certain setup, a certain way, but still mostly usable if you're doing 2014 rules, or for whatever reason you want to use this stat block instead of the original. Another option I've seen some people discuss is using the Vampire Umbral Lord from the 2024 Monster Manual. I did actually do a video talking about 2024 monsters, new ones, I think, that you could add into Ravenloft and Curse of Strahd, if you're interested. Next stat block we're going to look at is called the 3-Phase Strahd. This is by DragnaCarta of Curse of Strahd Reloaded fame and is intended to be his version, his take on the boss for Reloaded. It is split into 3 parts. It's 3 phases after all: the mage, the soldier, and the vampire. In addition to linking you the Reddit post, which has the stat blocks as images, some very helpful people have created them as D&D Beyond stat blocks and made them public in the homebrew section. So I'll link to somebody's take on them. I had a quick look. I didn't have an extremely thorough look. I'm pretty sure they're accurate, but just bear in mind they may not align perfectly with the actual version. And what I like about them is that each phase is not only flavor of Strahd's history and personality, but they all kind of have 2 actions, 2 bonus actions, 2 reactions, 2 lair actions. So there's kind of nice flexibility there. You can almost, for each turn, do a couple of different things. You don't have to do the same thing each time. They are challenge rating 21 or 19 in sunlight, so stronger than the original raw vanilla stat block, which is 15. And they each have 331 HP, so that's just shy of 1,000 HP total, which is a lot, but Strahd is supposed to fight them in sunlight the whole time, so he's losing 20 HP per round anyway, and not regenerating health if that happens. And I think I read in one of the comments that Dragna says that this is intended for the PCs basically having all their resources. So in traditional Curse of Strahd, or their PCs, the Castle Ravenloft is a battle of attrition, and they lose resources and strength and HP, spell slots as they go through the castle, so they're not going to Strahd at 100%, but I think this is intended that they're at 100% or not far off. He's got a faster speed in all forms, and it does make the point that the order that it's intended is mage, soldier, vampire, but it doesn't have to be. You can change it, and Strahd can even change and switch which form he's in outside of combat. So the mage has various attacks like a vampiric touch, telekinetic grasp, the latter being like the telekinesis spell. Bonus action, in addition to being able to do lightning bolt, has a circle of sickness where people within 10 feet of him roll a con save, 86 necrotic damage, and disadvantage on their next attack roll. Oh, for any of these, presume that when I don't specify, it's the classic thing of if they succeed on the save, they still take half the damage but don't take the effect. And that's across all the stat blocks I'm talking about today. His reactions include Misty Step and casting Blindness Deafness in response to someone attacking him. That also does extra necrotic damage. What I like about them as well is they're not just like he does this spell, but it's like he does this spell and it does this additional thing like extra damage. That's cool. That's a very Strahd. And his lair actions, he can scatter people across the map, so he can separate people, move people. And Fiery Sphere, which is like a mini fireball, smaller size and less damage. The soldier phase, it's got some cool traits like Battlefield Awareness, where he has advantage on strength and dex saves, on effects he can hear and see, such as traps and spells. Makes him seem like he's very wise when it comes to, wise on the battlefield, given his history as a general, as a commander of armies. He can do longsword attacks or umbral nets. Longsword can potentially knock people prone in addition to doing damage. And umbral net is a ranged attack that does necrotic damage, but also automatically restrains. That's very cool. Bonus actions in this phase: Thunderous Wave, which is a bit like Thunder Wave, and Dark Volley. Conjures a rain of shadowy arrows. That is cool. I like that flavor. Within 120 feet, 10-foot radius, and dex save on necrotic damage. Reactions: Commander's Retreat. If he takes damage from a melee attack, he can force the attacker to do a strength save or push them 5 feet away, and he can move away up to his speed without triggering opportunity attacks. Vengeful Strike. Someone hits him from a distance, he can move up to them and hit them with a longsword. Lair actions: Ghostly Hands. Hands appear in this 10-foot square within range. Strength saves or you're restrained by ghostly hands. And Fog Bank is similar to Fog Cloud, but he can also move and take a hide action as a reaction. And then the vampire phase, phase 3. This is closer to the original stat block, and I like that. You've got the mage who's doing all the spell stuff, the soldier where he's doing all the sort of classic general stuff, and then this is just like classic vampire, classic Strahd stuff. You've got Unarmed Strike, Bite, Charm. Father of the Night means a creature reduced to 0 HP by his bite becomes a vampire spawn at the start of his next turn, not the following night. Rules is written max HP reduced to 0 and killed. They become a vampire spawn. I think it's like the next night, or so it could even be like a day later. But nope, this is like 6 seconds later. Ha! Bonus actions: Bat's Frenzy, summon a swarm of bat-like shadows from his cloak. Cool. Within 10 feet, dex save and necrotic damage disadvantage on your next attack roll. Predator's Fury, power of wolf-like shadows, targeting 2 creatures within 5 feet of each other, dex save, or force damage, not prone. Reactions: Knight's Retreat, fly up to a speed without opportunity attacks, and Blood Frenzy. If he's attacked, he can move up to his speed towards the attacker doing an unarmed strike. His lair actions: Deluge of Blood, wave of blood explodes outwards. Wah. Creatures affected within 10 feet of that must do strength saving throw or bludgeoning. And Wails of the Damned, Strahd summons an ethereal torrent of shrieking spectres. And that's a wisdom save or frightened, and frightened creature is also paralyzed and loses concentration. That can be pretty damning. There's a lot going on with this. If Strahd, for example, rolls a initiative around 20, that's when the lair actions trigger as well. So you could potentially do 3 attacks all in one go, like his action, his bonus action, and his lair action could trigger all around the same time. But then again, that gives the players time to heal and think about what to do, and he only gets a reaction to retaliate. I really do like it. I think it's cool. I'd love to try it out sometime. My longer term goals are to do a separate channel that's an actual play of Ravenloft, but maybe do some one-shots, and one could be Strahd Must Die Tonight, where it's this stat block instead of the original stat block. I guess we'll see. Dragna himself, in the sort of extra intro or extra text alongside the stat blocks when he posted them on Reddit, says that the rules as written, wall-phasing Strahd can be, and I quote, a torturous slog. I wonder if this could be quite a slog as well. But I've also heard some people who praise and rave about this stat block. So if you've run this and it was great, please let me know. If you ran this but considered it a slog and maybe wished you'd actually run the sort of classic Strahd, if you will, also leave a comment. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts. Next up, we have what's called the Real Devil Strahd. You might know it better as the Challenge Rating 27 Strahd. There's a link in the description. So there's kind of a standalone PDF that just does the stat block, which I think most people know about. But the people who created it have also got Van Richten's Encyclopedia, volumes 1 and 2, and I believe it's also in volume 1, so I'll include a link to that in the description as well. I've got access to both. I bought both, and I think there are minor differences, but it's pretty much the same. But I will be referring to the smaller, just stat block PDF for this. But I think the one in the Encyclopedia might be like a revised, tidy-up version. It incorporates the Feigns. So if you're doing the whole Feign stuff, I think people like Lunch Break Heroes, DragnaCarta incorporate that. If you consecrate the Feigns, then Strahd grows weaker. And in this instance, things like the Mountain Feign increases his AC by 6. Swamp Feign gives him various damage resistances. So it's like an incentive to sort out all the Feign stuff to make him weaker and a bit more of a survivable encounter, I guess. The stat block is a 1.5 pages long of a PDF with teeny tiny writing. It is a big beastly stat block. His flying speed in Mistform is 60, not 20. His regen is 30 HP, not 20. Interestingly, he doesn't have a huge amount more HP than the original. It's 161 instead of 144. So whereas a lot of stat blocks boost the HP like Dragna did. Like I say, I'm not going to talk about all of this. I just feel like I'm just reading the stat block to you. That's going to be boring. But things like the rejuvenation explanation is that when he's killed, ideally he needs his body destroyed, his head removed, his heart pierced with a wooden stake, and the stake is not removed. Otherwise, he comes back straight away, I'm guessing, or soonish, or it takes 1d10 years. And what I like about the 1d10 years thing is it's the whole Strahd Returns thing from the epilogue. It's kind of in line with that. And it also just reminds me of old school, the vampire lore, the whole chop the head off in order to kill it for good. He's also immune to the Icon of Ravenloft, which I think is kind of you don't want to nerf players' stuff, but the Icon of Ravenloft is quite an easy thing to grab. It's not one of the Taroka treasures, it's the one that's in the chapel, and it can be pretty nasty against vampires, making them a lot weaker and easier to kill. He's a monstrous form. He has to be out of sunlight and less than half of his HP, and he can polymorph into a large monstrous form for 10 minutes. And that does things like an extra attack and an extra action that allows him to do one more attack or dash. He can grow wings, has a flying speed of 150. Wow. Resistance to all damage except radiant, and advantage against creatures that don't have all their HP. Heart of Sorrow now has 100 HP instead of 50. And he's got a lot more spells. He's a 16th level spellcaster, and he can cast up to 8th level spells. New ones include some new ones created by the author called Ground Fog, Reign of Terror, Shadowbind, and Strahd's Baneful Attractor. I did look at these, and I was going to talk about them later, but I'm not sure. I didn't really like them, so I'm going to talk about those. You can check them out yourself. But he also gets spells like Cloud Kill, Disintegrate, Finger of Death, stuff like that. But also he has a lot of the spells that he has is in its original stat block, plus more, rather than, say, changing the spell list entirely. It's like his original list plus these stronger spells on top. His multi-attack, he can do unarmed strikes, or he's got a +3 longsword. Nice. And then he has things like Charm and Children of the Night. Plus he can do something called Blood Drain in Mist form, which is essentially biting while in Mist form. Feral Swarm, recharge ability, giant form of bats in a 90-foot cone to dex save, or bludgeoning and piercing damage, and potentially knocked prone as well. He can bite as a bonus action, and he has something called Beguiling Gaze, which is a whiz save. Strahd has advantage on attack rolls against that target until they take damage or until Strahd's next turn. And they become a willing creature for Strahd's bite as well. But they can be immune to it if they pass immune for an hour. The only listed reaction is Counterspell, which can be done 3 times per long rest. But he also has Counterspell in his spell list. So I'm guessing that these are kind of like free uses that don't take a spell slot. And then if you wanted him to cast a Counterspell beyond that, he can use spell slots. And then also there's other reactions you can do, like he's got the shield spell as well. Legendary actions is Strahd's standard movement and attack. One's called Shocking Bolt, which is a ranged attack that does lightning damage and advantage if the target is wearing metal armor. Frightening Gaze is a whiz save or frightened. Ancient Might, an attack that's automatically a crit, and is a lingering injury as well from the Dungeon Master's Guide. Shadow Mirror, either teleport somewhere else within 60 feet, or can swap places with a creature, and if they're unwilling, it's a whiz save. And he can charm as well. The lair actions, a bunch of them are the rules as written ones, such as closing doors and windows, summoning an angry spirit, and summoning shadow from somebody's shadow. There's also a 120-foot mist centered on Strahd that's lightly obscured, and creatures in it become vulnerable to necrotic damage. That's interesting. The mist lasts for 1 minute, so I'm assuming it doesn't specify like other criteria for ending it. So I don't know if I'm assuming that you can have this roll for like a minute, and if you switch to another lair action, the mist disappears, rather than the mist stays and you can use a different lair action and the two are going at once. That's probably a bit too OP. And another one where psychic impressions of victims appear. Reminds me a bit of like the Rahadin thing. Each creature within 120 feet of Strahd is automatically deafened, but then can roll a whiz save each turn to stop it. So there's no whiz save initially. Straight away it's an auto fail, and then they have to fight it off later. That could be potentially bad news for the PCs if done. And then the rest of the document talks about things like his magic items, including his sword and armor, and about those 4 spells I mentioned earlier. See what you think about those spells. They're interesting. One of them involves actual animals raining from the sky, some of which don't survive, but they're all harmless animals like frogs and cows and stuff. It's interesting, but I don't know if I'd use them. And if it's in Castle Ravenloft, it's probably, unless it's like one of the outdoor areas, it's probably not going to potentially be used. I do like it, and I have been considering using it in my own game. So for those of you who don't know, I ran Curse of Strahd, and now I'm running a wider Ravenloft campaign, and have been for the last few years with players that are beyond level 10, and they've been to other domains of dread. Like if you're familiar with Van Richten's Guide, beyond Barovia, there's places like Folkovnia, Haslan, Valachan, and so on. And I considered a Strahd's Return thing similar to the epilogue in Curse of Strahd, where they maybe at like levels 18, 19, 20, they have to go back to Barovia and take out Strahd for good. And I was considering this stat block, and I probably will still use this stat block, or maybe a variant of the stat block, or edit it to my needs. I think stat blocks like this are a blessing and a curse, no pun intended. There's lots to choose from, and it gives variety, and it shows them as powerful, and there's like almost every turn you can do something completely different. But it's so overwhelming, and it's so hard to keep track of everything. Like, before the battle, you'd be reading, I don't know about you folks, but you know, when you're researching like a boss battle, you want to know the stat block inside out, and this is like, it's a lot. But like I say, if you're running for a higher level party, or you're doing like a sequel campaign and Strahd comes back later, this kind of stat block I think would work really well. My only other bugbear, and I've seen other people say this in reviews and stuff, there's a lot of typos and formatting issues, and it's a shame that there hasn't been an updated version. I know there's been at least one updated version in the past, but not an updated version to take care of those. And I know that sounds really nitpicky, but some of it is like, it'll be a list of things, and you know how in stat blocks, like, each thing is bold at the beginning, so you know that that's like an ability and not like a second paragraph. But some of them aren't bold or italics or whatever it is, and so it's not obvious if you're quickly glancing at stuff. It means you might miss stuff or not realize he's got certain abilities. This next stat block is a fan-made one. I've got a feeling, and I'm sorry if I've forgotten, I've got the memory of a fish, that somebody talked to me on either a Reddit post or on one of my other YouTube videos saying, I'm going to do this version of Strahd that's an action-oriented Strahd inspired by the action-oriented monsters by Matt Colville, the famous D&D DM guru. I'll include a link in the description to the stat block, which since then appeared on Reddit. And I'll also link to Matt Colville's video about action-oriented monsters, which I rewatched for the purpose of the video and watched years ago. It's great. Basically, it's kind of like a game design change where to make boss monsters more interesting and not either too weak that the PCs kill them really quickly, or too strong that the PCs struggle against them, but the monster can literally kill them instantly. He gives them what's called villain actions, which are sort of like unique legendary actions, and monsters can make 3 of them, but they only trigger once per encounter, rather than say once per round. And what the author of this stat block does, their Reddit username is AldrinHD, so thank you AldrinHD, is basically adapted Matt Colville's action-oriented monsters. Matt Colville has since, with his company, MCDM, created his own monster manual called Flea Mortals, which incorporates this kind of game design mechanic. And I'm saying all this because the creator of the stat block explains that they used the vampire from Flea Mortals as a base, and then added to it, sort of, in their own words, reflavored it to be more Strahdy, as opposed to, say, taking Strahd and adding stuff to it. Similar to the previous, the Challenge 827 one, he's got extra spells, but not as strong. He's now a 12th level spellcaster and can cast up to 6th level. New spells include things like Chill Touch, Message, Disguise Self, Darkness, Fear, Telekinesis, and Disintegrate. But some are removed, such as Ray of Frost, Animate Objects, and a few others. And a lot of the actions are similar to Strahd, so Claw, Bite, Charm, Children of the Night, and his damage into hit bonuses are slightly higher. Although Children of the Night, I like this change. Children of the Night now includes minions from Strahd's minions table, so it's not just swarms of bats, swarms of rats, it could be other things, I think, without looking at a table, and off memory, it's things like ghouls, vampire spawn, and things like that. Inhuman Agility is a bonus action where you can move up to speed without opportunity attacks. So it's a bonus action now, not a legendary action. And he's got a reaction called Run, My Child. If a Strahd ally is hit, Strahd can command them to move away without triggering opportunity attacks. And now his legendary actions. Remember I said earlier, these are once per encounter. Obey My Will. It's a whiz save of 19. If they fail, Strahd can control them and use their movement to move wherever Strahd or you as the DM wants, and then make either a melee attack against a target Strahd's choice, or drop prone. Cheeky. He is the Ancient. Turns into mist form, his speed is doubled, any creature that he passes through makes a con save or takes 10d6 necrotic damage, and then he transforms back. And he is the Land. A big swarm of bats surround Strahd, filling 60 feet around him. That's a lot of bats. If the battle's in the crypts, that's perfect because of all the bats in the ceiling or whatever. Turns into a bat, flies within them, and can transform into a vampire next to someone, attack them, transform back into a bat. And he can do this 3 times, so it's kind of like he appears, attacks, moves, appears, attacks, moves, appears, attacks, moves, and then the bats dissipate, and Strahd is back in vampire form. And he still has his lair actions. This is confirmed by the creator in a Reddit comment. It doesn't say it on the stat block. I like it. It's cool. I do like those villain actions, and they could be things to consider giving Strahd anyway, especially if you're running like a higher level party, but you want to kind of keep it close to rules as written, but you also want Strahd to be a bit stronger and have some cool boss type abilities. This might be one to consider. And speaking of Matt Colville, the last one I'm going to look at is an MCDM official stat block. MCDM created a few NPCs and villains that people can have, and the vampire or boss, if you will, is called Count Rhodar von Glauer. And I've seen a few people say that they've used this on places like Reddit. So it's going to be similar to the last one because it is essentially MCDM's take on a vampire boss with villain actions. It's designed as a solo enemy, it says it in the stat block. But the wording, when you look at the rules for how solo monsters intend to be used in Flea Mortals, it does say he can be solo. So you can consider adding minions as well, but this guy can probably just take on the players on his own. If you do add minions as well, just careful that you don't overdo it. It's challenge rating 19 versus Strahd, classic Strahd 15. I looked at Flea Mortals solo creature encounters table, and I think that's deadly for 4 to 5 PCs at 10th or 11th level, if I've interpreted it right. But like only slightly, not like majorly horrifically deadly, like only just beyond hard, if you will. AC of 18, and the HP's pretty much double, it's 289. And he's got a fly speed as standard, so I don't think there's any mention that he's a shape changer. So like if you're reskinning this to be Strahd essentially, instead of transforming into a bat and can fly, or mist and can fly, he's just basically this vampire form and can just fly. If he hits 0 HP, he teleports to his resting place. That's cool flavor. And I can see Strahd doing that anyway, given his sort of knowledge of the arcane. That could be a quite cool thing. But you might want to change it to his Misty Escape and kind of do it the classic way. Also doesn't have vampire weaknesses. I think it says something in the info for vampires in Flea Mortals that, you know, some vampires have found ways to stave off sunlight. And I know some people, Curse of Strahd DMs do this anyway, because maybe the Heart of Sorrow blocks sunlight or whatever. But you might want to add in vampire weaknesses from Strahd, or the sort of classic vampire stat block from 5th edition, because otherwise things like the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind and Sunsword will be ineffective. And that's no fun. Your players have worked hard to get those. They should be able to just use them. This guy has an ability called Spear Sacrifice. It kind of reminds me of legendary resistances, but it's flavored differently. So he has these 3 spears that protect him. He can also use as weapons, I'll talk about that in a minute, but can also use them to automatically pass a saving throw, but then one of them breaks and he's got less spears he can use for the attacks. So the idea is the more he gets hit and the more he loses failed saves, the fewer attacks he can do as well. It's like he's slightly getting weakened. His multi-attack is called Sanguinus. Yeah, you do that twice, and then 1 Spear of the Damned attack for each spear sacrifice use he has remaining. Sanguinus is his melee attack, so like an unarmed strike, but acts like a bite, draining HP, lowering max HP, turns them into a vampire spawn the following midnight if it drains them to 0. Spear of the Damned, a range of 60 feet, force damage, target is knocked prone and restrained. I don't think that requires a save. No, it's an automatic thing, so they are just automatically prone and restrained until they free themselves or someone frees them using an athletics check, or if he uses the spear to attack someone else, or if the spear is destroyed via spear sacrifice. Bonus action Beguile. This is similar to Obey My Will in the previous one I talked about, sort of like Charm, get them to move and attack someone else or fall prone. And Inhuman Agility, like last time, they move bonus action instead of legendary action. Reaction, Withering Stare, targets creature who hits him with save on necrotic damage. And then Villain and actions. Once again, I'll say that these are intended once per encounter because they would be OP if they were ever encounter. Bloodstained, 20-foot radius sphere within 120 feet, kind of reminds me of Fireball. People who fail the dex save are bloodstained, and he has advantage on attack rolls against them, and they have disadvantage against his Beguiling Gaze bonus action, whatever it was called. Fire Drake. He turns into a large dragon made of fire. That is cool. I know some Strahd purists will probably be like, no, Strahd shouldn't do that, but he's in, centuries studying magic. He's learned a way to turn into a fiery dragon, of course. And anyone he passes rolls dex save or 88 fire damage. Mr. Blades fills an area 60 feet within him of mists. He can teleport up to 4 times, making a Sanguinus attack after each teleport. So that's kind of similar to the Action-Orientated Strahd stat block. And I can see that author, as well as borrowing from Vampire stat blocking Flea Mortals, probably borrowed from this one as well. Got a few utility spells, but they're non-combat, such as Detect Thoughts and Disguise Self. They're cool, but I'd consider adding some of Strahd's other rules as written spells as well. But you may not need to, because all the other stuff you can do with these spears and the villain actions is pretty cool and maybe enough. I like it, and while parts of it feel very Strahd-esque, some of it doesn't feel very Strahdy. Strahd, I think, just like casting things like Fireball and some of the other spells you can do just feels more Strahdy to me. However, I might personally save it for another vampire boss. So as mentioned earlier, running a post-Curse of Strahd Ravenloft campaign, and they may see a vampire soon. I'm about to run one of the minor domains listed in Varanthra's Guide called the Shadowlands, and some information I found about it suggests there might be a vampire hiding in an old chapel basement, and I can totally see myself using this stat block for that. And there we go, 5 alternative stat blocks for Strahd. I chose 5 that were, I couldn't not include DragnaCartas. I could not include the Real Devil Strahd challenge rating 27. But there's loads out there. There are so many on Reddit. When I looked and just researched it, I was like, that's a lot of stat blocks. So inevitably, there's some great ones I've not talked about. Please let me know of other ones you found, other ones you've used. How did it go? Did it go well? Did it not? Please let me know in the comments. I think YouTube has a thing where if you try and share a link to a non-YouTube website, the comment won't work. So if you're conscious of that, what you could do is you can tell me what it's called, and then I can dig it out. And I know I'm allowed, as the person who runs the channel, when I respond in comments, I'm fine to leave links. And this happened with someone recently where they said they couldn't share something, and they told me it was called, and I was like, oh, is this it? So feel free to do that. Just tell me what it's called, where I can find it, and I can potentially link to it that way. And if you're after battle tips for Strahd, I've done a video all about that, but please bear in mind that's his rules as written stat block. But you might still find it helpful because it talks about different things you can do in different parts of the castle, how he can kind of use different rooms and different things in different rooms to his advantage, and so on. That's it for this one. What have I got coming up? On Curse of Strahd front, I want to do a video all about Strahd in terms of resources for him and role-playing him. I've already done combat, as I just mentioned. Oh, I listened to the audiobook of Escape from Castle Ravenloft, which is sort of like a choose-your-own-adventure style thing. And I was thinking of doing a quick video that kind of reviews it, tells you what's in it, without obviously telling you the whole story. What's the fun in that? More intended as what flavor you can borrow to add in your Curse of Strahd games. Keep an eye out for that one. And on the Ravenloft front, because I also do Ravenloft videos, the Adventurers League stuff was called Ravenloft Mist Hunters. And although I've talked about them sparingly in different videos, I'm going to do 2 dedicated videos. So it's like a 2-parter where I go through all 14 modules, tell you what's included. So if you're running something like Cartacus, or you're running, my brain's gone blank, a.k.a, or some of those domains, I'll tell you what you can borrow from them. There's even a moment, I've not read it yet, so it's going to be a surprise for me too, where they go to Barovia. So is there flavour in the Burrowy chapters that could be used in a Curse of Strahd game? I guess we'll see. I also recently started a YouTube membership. It's very similar to Patreon, where if you sign up, there's just some, at the lowest tier, there's things like badges and emoji you can use. But on the next tier up, there's members first videos. I try and post videos out a day or 2 early for members. Priority reply, discounts on my DMs Guild resources. I've got 3 of them. One of them is a Curse of Strahd specific thing as well. And then members only posts, members only polls. This is kind of like deciding the future of the channel. Hey, I'm thinking of doing this domain of Dread next. What do you think? Or what should my next Curse of Strahd video be? I've not got many members at the moment, so I think it needs to build a bit of momentum and a few more people join it before we start doing stuff like that. It's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. So sorry for people who've already joined and not seeing much activity. Once we get a few more people, I'll start doing that stuff and make it more worthwhile. But if you're considering joining, thank you in advance. Supports me, helps me to make more of these videos and buy better equipment, such as this microphone. This microphone is new. I used to use like a really cheap collar mic and things like that. Thanks very much.